Each individual control system, CS, consists of an input function, a comparator function, an output function, and memory, in which one or more reference standards are stored. The input function receives perceptual signals from one or more CSs lower in the hierarchy, or from sensory cells, and consolidates those signals, producing its own perceptual signal, which it sends to the comparator and passes on to a higher level CS, while perhaps storing some of it in memory. From time to time, memory receives an address signal from a higher level CS's output function, selects its stored reference standard whose address best matches the address signal, and sends the reference standard in the form of a signal to the comparator. Unless the input signal and the reference signal agree within limits, the comparator sends an error signal to the output function, which in turn sends signals addressing one or more lower-level CSs or reaching outside the CS realm to stimulate one or more muscle fibers. Signals are not generally simple. Indeed, they may vary enormously in the amount of information they carry. The signals of a mid-level CS might be comparable in bandwidth to signals of high-definition 3D television, complete with stereo sound. So here's a typical CS in its resting state. Perceptual signals come in constantly and are processed and passed on. But when a higher level CS addresses the CS's memory, it springs into action. Selecting from stored perception the one whose address most closely matches the address signal, memory sends a reference signal to the comparator. If the comparator determines that the perceptual signal from the input function sufficiently approximates the reference signal, it does nothing. In other words, its surroundings appear to this particular CS to be okay, so no action is necessary on its part. But if the perceptual signal does not sufficiently approximate the reference signal, the comparator sends an error signal to the output function, which in turn generates address signals to lower CSs or directly to muscles. The organism acts, and thus perhaps changes how their surroundings appear to its CSs, in particular to the CS we are talking about. The negative feedback process is repeated at several times per second until the comparator is satisfied that the signal from the input function adequately approximates the reference signal. Note that even though the comparator of this CS is satisfied, the comparator of a higher level CS may not be satisfied with its perceptions. So it may send down a different address signal, altering or restarting the process here at this level. So from this we see that each CS uses CSs below it to control its perception, and in turn is similarly used by the CSs above it.